Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Raymond Carr. I'll be moderating this, and I will turn it over to Melissa to give us the Film Impact Georgia recap.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our third Ask a Pro Anything. I am the Executive Director of Film Impact Georgia. For any of you joining us today that aren't familiar with us, we started in early 2019 as an organization to better support independent filmmakers in the state of Georgia. We offer different grants, different educational programs like this one. And we are also working on a development lab for feature films later this year. So all of your donations today actually will go into our Filmmaker Grant Fund, which we opened on April 1st for our fall grant, and submissions close in July. So this is the perfect time to be working on those projects and submitting to our short film grant.
Right. Yeah, and that grant is a great opportunity for any short filmmaker, no strings attached, just gotta be making it in Georgia. So definitely check the link and ask us any questions moving forward about that sort of thing. So for now, I would love to introduce our wonderful guest, Natalie, and she will give you a lot of information about her, and then we'll go into some questions. So make sure you have your questions lined up, and we'll start feeding them in. So go ahead, Natalie, take it away.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this session. I'm Natalie Metzger. So I am a film producer and also director and writer. And I have a soft spot in my heart for Georgia because I not only went to college at Emory, but I also worked a little bit there back when I was working in the theater world, and then also shot Greener Grass there a few years ago, which premiered at Sundance last year. So yeah, I love Georgia. And I'm from Florida originally, so I'm like a Southeastern girl at heart. Yeah, I came up through the dance and theater world. I did my undergrad in theater and dance and minored in English, and then got a master's in choreography, and I was doing a lot of work for the stage, directing and choreographing and producing. And I started to get frustrated with the limited audience for live theater. That audience has been, dwindling over the past few decades, and I really wanted something that I made to be able to have an impact, nationally or internationally, and not to be limited by time either. With like a theater piece or a dance piece, you put it up for a few weekends, and only people within 20 miles of that theater can come see it, and only for those weekends, and so that they're out of town or something, they can't come. And so I started filming my dances, making these like little dance films. I just shot them myself, edited it myself, like just started making them on my own, and sent those off to festivals. They started doing well, and so I started making more of those, and then made the jump into music videos and commercials, which are very similar to dance films, just because it's like cool visuals, interesting music, that kind of thing. And I started working with women in film, and got a lot of commercial experience that way. And then some of my film friends would be like, hey, can you help me make my short the way that you made your short? And so I just started helping them make their films, and then they started recommending me to their friends. And so I would get these emails of like, hey, I'm a friend of so-and-so, and they recommended you as a producer. Can you do this? Like, we'll offer you this amount of money. And so I started getting paid to do it, and just kind of fell into it and just started helping my friends. And I really loved doing it. It was something that I had already been doing for the theater, like booking the vendors, hiring the crew, casting, making the budget, all that stuff. I'd already been doing that for the stage. So it felt like an easy transition into film. And then I started doing pilots, and then series, and then features. I was also working as an AD a lot, which felt like similar skills. And yeah, I am now the VP of Production and Development at Vanishing Angle, a production company based in Los Angeles. And we do both films and episodic. And yeah, it's been a wild ride so far.
That's great. Yeah, we'll get to some of the projects you have been working on, but just as a general question, obviously, like, producer is a large term, and especially for those who haven't necessarily worked on larger productions, you know, there may be several producers involved in it. It's not like a production designer or a cinematographer where you do one thing. So as a producer, can you describe a little bit about how you like to work? What are the things that you generally do on films? And I know it changes from time to time. And at what point in the film do you join in?
Yeah, I mean, producer is the funniest term. I feel like it's the one where like the general public that's not in the film industry doesn't understand what a producer does. Like my family, we're like, so what do you do? Like, are you
A
just
lot
like
of people on set don't understand what the producer does either.
exactly. And so, you know, how I like, and like, that's not actually the fault of, that's like, it's actually an issue that we're working on addressing both within the PGA, the Producers Guild, and also just within like local producer groups that I'm a part of, that we're working to change that, because it's actually a huge issue. And one of the issues, one of the causes for it is that the producer credit gets diluted a lot. And there's a lot of different kinds of producers. So there's like the executive producer, and then regular producer, and then associate producer, and consulting producer. And there's all these different titles, and oftentimes those credits also get offered in exchange for financing. And so there's a little bit of dilution there that it's confusing of like what an actual producer does. But, you know, in general, producer in my mind is someone who is there from like soup to nuts, like starting with the script, working with the filmmaker, handling essentially, I see the producer and the director as like very much in the kind of marriage. And so the like producer is handling all the logistical side, and the director is handling all the creative side, but they're also married together. And so sometimes the director is like giving feedback or having influence on the logistical side, and the producer can sometimes also have influence and suggestions for the creative side. But like in general, those are kind of the domains, but there's this like kind of shared Venn diagram little element that's shared. But, you know, everything logistical, organization, I'll give notes on a script, I'll give notes on performance on set, but I'll also be building the budget, hiring the crew, and it also depends on the size of the production. So on smaller productions, I'm doing everything. Like typically, like I'll be the only producer that's on set, that's working directly with the filmmaker. That's, you know, everything from building the budget to doing accounting, to doing contracts, to negotiations with agents, to, you know, all those things. And the bigger that the productions get, the more that there are people that are specialized to handle some of those things. And so, or the bigger the producer pool gets. And so it's like, cool, like now it's like a team of 3 of us, and we're all kind of sharing the load accordingly. Yeah, I like to get involved in a project really early. I love meeting with filmmakers really early on when they have a script and they're figuring out what to do with it, or they're running it through labs, getting feedback. That's like the time that I think a lot of those logistical and creative things can be addressed, like before you get into the details of pre-pro and actually budgeting and scheduling and all those things. Like if you can talk through and make plans that early on, I find that the rest of the process actually goes a lot smoother. Yeah, some people compare producers to like wedding planners, and I actually think it's an apt comparison, because you really are in this version, the director is the bride, and you're really trying to produce, like make that thing happen, make that event happen. And the event is the filming of this thing and getting it out into the world. And so also some producers are just like there for the production, and then they're like, okay, great, moving on. I like to be there throughout the whole process. And so even after the film is completed, of like making sure it has a proper festival run and really kind of guiding it through that festival run, and then helping with choosing and selecting and negotiating with distributors and international sales teams and all of that fun stuff, to make sure that it gets out into the world, because the whole point is to get it seen and out there.
So there's a question that popped up on the chat, and I was planning on asking this already, but now that you're in your position with your company and what have you, can you walk us through something where you are either looking for or you have found a script or a director, maybe it's a combination of the two. Are you the ones reaching out to these people? Are they reaching out to you? Can you talk a little bit about how you come with the content that you are now developing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's very organic. One of the things that we like to do at Vanishing Angle is, you know, we're very filmmaker forward. We really support creative. Like, we are all about the kind of supporting, like, kind of the auteur vision. And so we meet filmmakers in all sorts of different ways. Festivals are a big place where we connect with filmmakers. We'll, you know, see a short in like one of the shorts blocks, or watch a movie, or hear buzz around someone, or just meet someone at one of the parties and just feel like we connect with them. And then we'll say, like, what do you have going on? Like, what scripts do you have? Like, what projects are you trying to get off the ground? And so that can sometimes be an organic process through festivals. Sometimes it's people, you know, reaching out to us, just kind of cold reaching out, saying, you know, hey, this is my, you know, my deal. This is what I'm trying to do. We do get a lot of those reach outs. So it's a little bit hard to sift through them. There's just so much, even though we work a lot, there's just so much time in a day. So we're not able to read through all the scripts that are submitted to us. But another way is just through the filmmaker community. So oftentimes we'll work with one filmmaker, and then that filmmaker has, you know, a director friend who's working on getting their project off the ground. They're like, oh, we think that you guys would really connect and have a good vibe. And we really approach it as a community and as a family. So it's, you know, like, we'll meet with someone and just see, like, do we like this person? Do we like their vibe? And we much more prioritize the filmmaker than the script, because for us, it's all about finding interesting filmmakers that have bold and unique visions. And, you know, they could have 3 different scripts that are all great, or they could have a new project that they're developing, but it's less about the specific project, because we're not the kind of company that's like, oh, we're looking at market viability and, like, you know, with this kind of genre and this kind of thing. Like, we're not that company. We're all about the filmmaker. And so it's like more about feeling that vibe and that person to person connection, rather than, you know, a script or a package, so to speak.
So you don't necessarily develop the project, or do you come to, I guess when a filmmaker has a project, is it ready to go, or are you still in the process of helping them develop it as well?
It runs the gamut, but the majority of the films we do, we are part of the development process really early on. So we have a writers group that happens every Tuesday night called Fun Lab. And that's a way that we workshop new material. And so anyone can, like, join. They just have to participate in Fun Lab for like a handful of weeks before they're, like, allowed to present. So they have to, you know, kind of buy into the community, like not buy in, but like be part of the community before they can present. But once you have been part of the Fun Lab community and are giving feedback to people, then you can present one of your own scripts. And it can be anything from feature scripts, short scripts, rough cuts of things that people are looking for feedback on. And each week we focus on a different project. And so if it's a feature script, everyone will read the feature before Fun Lab that week. And then we just all meet and we'll give feedback on it. And we try to train people on how to give, like, really constructive feedback. It's a really great group. It's like writers, directors, actors, production designers, costume designers, actors. And so it's a really varied group. And so it's a really great way to get feedback. So a lot of the projects that we do have, like, gone through that kind of Fun Lab program. Beast, which we had at Sundance this year, went through that program, and a film that we just shot in January called See You Then was also went through that workshop. And then sometimes, you know, people will bring us scripts that are essentially already ready to go, and then then there's, like, less of a development process, or the development might happen more kind of during pre-pro and production. But in an ideal world, we love to be part of that process early on.
Great. Melissa, we got some audience questions.
Yes, the next question comes from Miguel Torres. How do you balance production of a current project while prepping for the next project?
That's a hard one. I don't know if I've figured out the whole like work balance thing yet. I mostly just start eating into my like sleep hours or like my meal hours. But yeah, I think, you know, in general, production to me always takes priority. So it's like the thing that we are making in that moment is like the thing that should be taking up the majority of the time. And, you know, there's always, you know, emails and preps and, you know, and things happening for future projects down the line of just, you know, checking in with different distributors or financiers or things, or like checking on script status. But I try to always prioritize the production that's happening right that moment, because that's the thing that's in the moment that needs the most attention. And that's where I can also be the most help, I think.
Right. You want to do another one, Melissa?
Sure. Next one comes from Crystal Kim. What are your thoughts on viability, market or otherwise, for filmmakers who are interested in doing shorts and features long term? I know many use shorts as a stepping stone to get features and don't look back. Curious about your thoughts on filmmakers who want to have a career continually doing both.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I feel like things have changed a lot in the last 5 years, where shorts, you know, it used to be, okay, cool, like you have a script, you send it out, you know, and you see who's interested, and then you get it made. But I think with like the kind of glut of content coming out, and also just a little bit of a change in how people are aware of filmmakers, that there's more focus on execution and on the filmmaker themselves, of like what their vision is or what their style is. And so more and more often we're hearing from distributors and financiers when we bring them projects, it's like, okay, well, is there a directing sample? Is there a proof of concept? Is there a short? And the projects that have shorts that have done really well on the festival market tend to get more attention than ones that don't. And so before, you know, shorts definitely weren't like a requirement to make a feature, but I think at least with indie films, like specifically with writer directors, it is becoming more assumed that like you'll knock out a short to like show your style. In terms of long-term viability of continuing to do shorts, the issue is just that there's not a ton of financing for them. So, you know, with like a feature, there's a whole market obviously to like sell it at, you know, like streamers can buy it. There's you know, a commerce around it. With shorts, there really isn't. I mean, it's slightly changed. You know, like there are some like short film distributors now, but it's still very, very limited. So it's just hard to get those financed. One of the ways that we've been able to do it is like to create like anthology series with like a group of shorts. So Jim Cummings, who did the short Thunder Road, when it won the grand jury at Sundance, he got commissioned by Fullscreen to do 6 more single take shorts in that same vein. And it was as this like anthology series. And so it was essentially getting financing for short films, but it was in the context of this bigger thing that then we ended up releasing online as an anthology feature. And then after that, we got commissioned to do 3 more because one of those went to Sundance as well. So there's like a little bit of support for that. But in general, we always like doing shorts because we find that it's a great way to, one, keep up your craft. It's a way to just like test out creative, test out crew. You might be like wanting to work with a DP, but like you don't want to commit to a full feature with them. But like, great, let's test them out on a short. Let's see how they do, how they vibe. It's a great way for us to meet with and work with new filmmakers. So we really like shorts. The problem is just financing, but a lot of our filmmakers will just go and make shorts on the weekend. I mean, it's the affordability to actually make a short is like really low right now. Like you don't need a lot to make a really fun short. You can shoot it with your iPhone or an A7S or whatever. And And so we still love them just to do. And if you have the means to do it, and if you have a group of friends, it's like, great, let's just knock this out this weekend. I would highly recommend continuing to do it, because I think it's just a great way to work the craft and to have samples to show. But that's like the harder thing long-term, is finding financing for them.
Yeah, and I do know that some feature filmmakers have done a short to showcase a different genre. If they have been locked into like a horror genre and they want to do a comedy, they may do like a comedy short. So there's always a reason to do it if you can find the time and money. So
Exactly.
Great. Melissa, you want to do another? We got quite a few lining up.
Yes, we do. So does attaching A-list talent to a production help raise financing, or is it better to wait for casting after financing?
Most financing is dependent on cast attachments. Now, that hasn't been the case for a lot of our movies that we've done at Vanishing Angle, but like traditionally, with most distributors or financiers or sales teams, like a name attachment, and that name, has like so many different meanings of like, level and whatnot. But that can really help get financing. It can definitely grease the wheels. But it's not the only way to get something made. We've made movies with like no, quote unquote name actors that we've gotten financed through things like WeFunder, which isn't like crowdfunding like Kickstarter, it's actually crowd equity. And so people are like, they can put in as little as $100, but that $100 is actually an investment in the film. So they're actually buying a share of the stock of the film. And so if the film makes money and is in profit, then they get that money back. And it's like 120% profit participation, something like that. So we've gotten some finance through that. We also just have some like private equity investors that might get interested in a specific filmmaker that they really love and want to support, or a specific topic that they might want to like support a film about. So it's not a requirement. We've done tons of movies. Like we just finished, I think, our 17th or 18th feature film, and a good portion of those didn't have quote unquote name talent. But that, like, those are also, it also depends on the budget level. If you're trying to do something for $1 million or more, you kind of need that name attachment in order for the financiers to feel comfortable giving that money.
Right. You've mentioned, obviously, you're working with several different films at this point. I wonder if you could talk about your relationship with the creatives, with the director. What has been some of the more positive attributes of these people? What has been maybe things to avoid for some of those who are trying to form a relationship with you? What do you like and what do you not like when you start this? Yeah,
I mean, directors, it really is a marriage. Like that's like the best way that I've been able to describe it is a marriage, or sometimes I describe it as the producer is the midwife and like the director is giving birth. And so like the producer is like there to help facilitate that, that birth and help make it happen. But it's a very, very close relationship. And so I try to work as closely as I can with like my directors. So, but key qualities in my mind are, one, bold, unique vision, like something like really interesting idea, a really interesting way to execute it, something unique, like or a personality or a perspective that's not often seen in in media now. So whether it's from like a minority filmmaker or someone that just doesn't get a lot of attention normally, it's like it is also interesting to me to just like feature something new. Also just like basic kind of qualities of like being able to communicate. If Matt Miller, the president of Vanishing Eagle, he always says that the director is one of the few positions other than PA that can be an entry-level position. Like you can come in as a director and you cannot have any film experience. You can not know anything about cameras or gear or shots or whatever, but if you can communicate what you're picturing in your head and however you need to do that, you might not be using the like correct terminology, you know, or not, but if you can just communicate clearly what you're imagining, you will be a good director. And so that's really key. And then I think something that people don't talk about as much is follow through. I think that making, especially in the indie world, making an independent film is really hard and takes, you get a lot of rejections. There are a lot of speed bumps in the road. Things fall apart, financing falls through, something crazy happens with your location and you have to like think through things. And someone who is committed to the project that will continue to push it along. Sometimes development can take months, sometimes years. And if that director is someone that's always like, okay, but we're gonna get it done. What else can we be doing, and helping push that along? The producer is also someone that will be pushing it along. But if it really feels like a team, that project is more likely to happen. And it's a much better collaboration because it's really two people helping make sure, or three people, or, you know, however many producers there are, helping make sure the project gets made. That I think is a requirement for indie film.
Right. Melissa, you more audience questions?
Yes, I have 2 questions that are very similar, so I'm gonna throw them out at the same time. Do you take the location of a production into account when considering picking up a project, Georgia versus LA, etc.? And then someone else asked, how do you decide locations?
Yeah, so I don't feel like it comes into play when deciding whether I like a project or not, but it certainly comes into play when starting to budget it out and starting to figure out financing. You know, like tax incentives are really key to being able to pull off a lot of these budgets. It's one of the reasons why we shot Greener Grass in Georgia, and we shot a film last year in Utah, and a film we just shot this year in New York. You know, those were all shot in those locations specifically because of tax incentives. And those tax incentives can be pretty huge when you're looking at the overall scope of your budget. And makes it feasible. It allows you to put more money in front of camera. And so that is definitely key. And then like that paired with what location makes the most sense for a particular storyline. So for example, the films that we shot in Utah and New York both required snowy areas that felt very rural. And so, you know, Utah has a lot of like farmland that has a lot of snow and mountains, so that worked perfectly for us. Same thing with upstate New York. And so that's why we, you know, chose those ones. Greener Grass needed something that felt green and lush, and we were looking for something that was kind of like the quote unquote perfect suburb. And so Peachtree City, Georgia, like made so much sense. So yeah, it's a combination of like
sinister too.
What was that?
Just as sinister too.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a combination of like both like for financing reasons, and also, you know, like what the creative of the script requires that kind of lead to picking, you know, a state or a country.
Great. Melissa, do you have another one?
I do. For those of us with completed films that we're supposed to launch at festivals, how can we find a sales agent to present our films to streaming services?
Yeah, so we're on a little bit of a crazy time right now where film festivals like aren't happening or postponing or canceling or going virtual, which is creating lots of problems and questions and concerns and all sorts of new things that we're all trying to figure out. For example, we had our film Beast Beast that premiered at Sundance, but then it was supposed to screen at South by Southwest. And it was when we were hoping to have a lot of those follow-up conversations about sales and distribution, and of course South by canceled. Yeah, we're kind of figuring that out as well. It's all in process. I think the key is that a lot of the film festivals are partnering together right now to figure out what to do. And some of them are just like pushing back until they're able to meet in person. And again, some of them are doing, you know, virtual ticketed events. But you know, finding those like regional festivals like can still be helpful if you were already planning on, you know, on doing that. Great, like, you know, consider still doing that. If your film, if you need to get it out sooner, or need to start those conversations, you know, like we've been trying to organize, we've been doing indie.tv links that are private that you can like watermark, and that you know, go away after a certain number of views, and so you can make them expire, so it's a little bit more secure than like a Vimeo link, for example. We've been sending those to, you know, distributors to try to start getting you know, eyes on it, and also start promoting the filmmaker for like their next project. In terms of sales, getting a sales agent on board, reach out, like find films that are similar to yours in terms of like genre, budget level, those kind of things, and see, like, look on IMDb Pro and see who the sales companies were, and start reaching out to them. All of them have email addresses, you know, listed. Sometimes it's like a more generic email, and sometimes it's like a more specific person. It doesn't matter. Just email them and say, like, you know, I had this film. It was supposed to premiere at this festival, or we were planning on, you know, starting the festival process, and the pandemic has, you know, created craziness. We're looking for, you know, sales team would love to set up a Zoom chat or something, and like just send a quick log line. Make that email short and sweet. Sometimes emails can have so much information that it's actually overwhelming for someone to read on that first thing, especially if they're going through hundreds of emails a day. If you can make the request and the question really early on in the email, and it's very clear of what you're asking for, that is more likely going to get read and responded to. But don't be afraid to reach out to, like, you know, these sales companies. And again, also know that these sales companies, because we're working with a lot of them right now, they're also trying to figure this all out. You know, like, this is unprecedented territory with the pandemic. And so know that it might take time to figure out. So I know that it's a frustrating process, but it's kind of all in process.
Processing. So going back to some of the choices you make as far as producing and financing or finding financiers, movies like Greener Grass and Thunder Road are weird, which is great because we all love the weird shit. Have you found, I guess, pushback from distributors or kind of challenges dealing with more of the odder genres, or are you gravitating towards that specifically, and different? Do you just know your market better than most?
So I really like weird shit. It's just like my like personal preference. I like something that's like interesting and new and different. So that's the kind of stuff that I respond to really well. I mean, kind of going back to our whole philosophy here, we tend to really vibe with and support a specific filmmaker and a specific filmmaker's vision, rather than, like, you know, quote unquote, what's like, you know, viable in the marketplace now, or what's going to sell. With both Thunder Road and Greener Grass, they were each financed a little bit differently, but, like, you know, with Thunder Road, for example, that was one of those things where Jim went around, did the water bottle tour, you know, talked to people about the project, and everyone was like, well, come back to us, you know, once you've done your first feature, and then we can talk. And so it was kind of this like weird catch-22 of like, well, how do I make that first feature if, like, I can't get financing for that feature, you know, in order to get the second feature made? It's like this like weird thing. And this is a filmmaker who won the grand jury at Sundance for his short film. And even then it was like, people just like weren't willing to put up funds. And so he had to really bet on himself. And so he put up part of the equity for the film. And then there was an amazing guy, Zach Parker, who had seen the short at Sundance, responded to it really well, and wanted to be part of the feature. And so he came in and essentially financed another portion. And then we did a Kickstarter to help with like the gap there. And then there were individual financiers who just kind of reached out that were like, hey, can we give, this amount of money and get a small portion of the film? And so we kind of cobbled together financing in that way for Thunder Road. But it was definitely not the traditional model. It wasn't like going around town, pitching it, and then getting it greenlit somewhere, because it didn't get greenlit anywhere. Like people were worried about a first-time feature director, again, even though he had won the grand jury at Sundance for the short. And then of course, after we made the feature, everyone was like, oh my gosh, we love this. It wins the grand jury at South by Southwest. It goes to Cannes, it does all these things. But no one was willing to take that risk early on. And so we kind of had to cobble together from like different places. And Jim had to really bet on himself in many ways. And so, yeah, it's, I think the weird things are the things that are more likely to win a grand jury somewhere, or to like really have a splash with the festivals, or to make a big splash just within the community. But they're definitely harder to get financed. Same thing with Greener Grass. Greener Grass is super weird. But luckily there was a private equity investor who had seen Don and Jocelyn's first 3 short films and loved them and really wanted to support them and believed in them, and came on to support the feature. And so again, it was like lucky in that way that there was someone who believed in them. But yeah, I don't know if we had taken it around town, if it would have gotten greenlit, just because it is, like so weird and strange. But again, then it premieres at Sundance and then gets picked up by IFC. And so it's like a really weird game to figure out. But the way that we've done it best, and the way that we just feel good about ourselves doing, is supporting interesting filmmakers and interesting visions and interesting scripts, and not really worrying about the market viability, because what we found is like those filmmakers that have scripts that we really respond to, that are really interesting, are like will do well in the marketplace at some point, even if people aren't willing to take the risk early on.
Yeah. And a lot of those algorithms that they use are just not taking in all the factors, they're based on information that's, several years old, because that's how much time it takes to actually calculate all that kind of stuff. So
exactly.
It's great that you're doing that. Melissa, another maybe about crowdfunding.
Yes, I have 2 different questions that are around crowdfunding. Hudson asks, I'd love to hear about your experience with equity crowdfunding on the beta test, and if you feel like that's a viable option for most filmmakers. And then from Sherry, what's your experience / opinion of Seed and Spark? Cool.
So so for beta test, which was a film that we shot in November, this past November, we're currently in post-production on it, with Jim Cummings, the director of Thunder Road. So that money was raised through WeFunder, through that crowd equity program that I was talking about. And so the interesting thing about that is that we actually took bets inside the office of like how long it would take to raise the money, and if we would even raise it at all. And I lost the bet by far. I was the most conservative bettor. I said it would take at least 5 weeks to hit our goal, and if we even hit it. And we ended up raising somewhere around $300,000 in 12 days. And so that was amazing and great. But that's also coming off of Thunder Road winning the grand jury at South by, having 2 shorts at Sundance, and Jim kind of had a reputation and name and followers who wanted to participate in his next movie. And so we weren't sure. We were excited that it had worked, and that it had worked so quickly, and people seemed to be really excited about it. But we weren't sure if it would work for someone else who maybe didn't have the same following. But we actually did a WeFunder for one of the films that we shot in January called See You Then, which is like a micro budget LGBTQ film, and we also did it through WeFunder. And so we've seen success with it. I think it is yet to be seen how how broad that can work and how often. I think there was like a kind of boom with Kickstarter, and then people like there was Kickstarter fatigue after a while. And so I don't know if it'll be the same with WeFunder. I do think it's different that people can actually invest in a film and actually see profit participation. It makes it more like playing the stock market, where it's like, okay, I believe that this filmmaker can do something really special, and you're actually putting your money there and then potentially getting a lot of money back. So I don't know, it's a little bit untried. We're still figuring it out, but we've seen some success so far. In terms of Seed and Spark, I actually haven't worked with Seed and Spark before, so I feel like I can't speak to that. I've heard great things. I just haven't worked with them directly.
Well, we're having a workshop tomorrow about Seed and Spark, so people who are interested can learn more about it. And I've had a good success. We raised $20,000 for my last film through Seed and Spark, and we're big fans. So anybody who's wondering about that, you can reach out to us later. But we're big fans of Seed and Spark.
Also, real quick, I'm just going to interject. Everyone that's a part of our community group on Facebook gets a free 30-minute consultation through Seed and Spark, whether or not you choose to use the platform or you're just wanting to ask questions about crowdfunding. So go check out the Film Impact Georgia community group for more information.
Awesome.
So when some of these larger film festivals you've participated in now several times, do you have any sort of tips and advice for people who are going with their film to maybe a major festival, Oscar qualifying festival, or a market festival, things to avoid and to definitely do?
Yeah. I'll speak to what I've seen in the past because I don't know what is happening in the future.
Yeah, we all kind of have to talk about that in the past.
But yeah, I mean, I would say festivals are a great place to go, even if you don't have a project there. A lot of people like say like, oh, well, I'll go to Sundance if I get a project there, or I'll go to, South by. But I have found that I have met people at these festivals that didn't have a project there, that just like came to hang out and to meet people. And, we've like talked or met or stayed in touch or even like started working together just because there's something about a festival atmosphere that there's just like an energy, and because everyone's there for the same thing, and everyone has blocked out that time to just be there and meet with people and see movies, that there's a more of an openness to meet and network and do all these things than there is maybe, just if you try to set up a meeting in LA or Atlanta or New York. And so I would recommend going even if you don't have a project. Obviously, if you have a project, it makes it a lot easier because like one of the first questions is like, oh, do you have a film playing here? When is it playing? How can I see it? Yeah, I think the key to festivals is to know that it's a community. And so like any community, you have to put in some effort to be part of it. So it's not like you just show up and you're like, cool, my film is premiering here. Everyone, pay attention to me. There will be some attention on you if you have a project there, but if you really want to make it a kind of long-term thing, you have to be part of the community. So like going to the panels, communicating with people, like watching the movies, connecting with the filmmakers. Thunder Road won the grand jury at South by Southwest, but that filmmaking team had films at South by Southwest for 8 years, every year for 8 years prior to that. And so they were part of the community. And not to say that like, oh, well, that like that's part of it. But I think that like there's an understanding where you see people, you meet with them, you understand, you see the films and you start to understand, oh, like this is what stands out at this festival. This is what feels generic. This is what you can kind of just start to learn what the vibe of the festival is, because each festival also has its vibe and its style. Like there's definitely the way that Sundance is programmed versus South by is programmed is very different. And so you also just kind of get to learn also maybe which festivals would be best for your film, and it might be different for different films, like if you have different styles or genres or whatnot. Yeah, and then doing, doing the homework beforehand, before showing up to the festival. So looking and seeing who's going to be at the festival. Oftentimes the festival will send you their attendance list, their industry attendance list, which just gives you names and companies. It doesn't give you email addresses or anything, but you can see who's going, and it's okay, great. Who do I want to meet with? And reaching out to those people or those companies ahead of time, being hey, I'm going to be at Sundance, I'm going to be at South by, or wherever it is. I'm going to be at the Atlanta Film Festival. Would love to meet with you while you're there. What's your availability look like? And scheduling those meetings ahead of time. That's a great way to network and meet people that, again, it might be harder to schedule when you're just kind of back in your hometowns. And again, even if you're living in LA or New York, it's sometimes just hard to get that energy and that momentum that there just inherently is at a festival. And then one other thing is branding or recognizability. There's definitely something to be said for figuring out what your project's vibe is, or brand is, or tone is, or what you as a filmmaker, what your brand or style or tone is, and really pushing that when you go to the festival. So Greener Grass, it's directed, written, starring these two amazing women, Dawn and Jocelyn, and they have a very unique style and a unique approach to things, and they really pushed that when we went to Sundance. So they would walk Main Street and they would have matching outfits, and they would go really bold with these bold colors, and Greener Grass is very colorful, and they would incorporate that into their wardrobe and so people would comment all the time of oh, who are those people? We've heard about this movie, and then people start buzzing about both the filmmakers and the project, which can only be helpful. And obviously they have such a specific style, so that might not work for other projects, but figuring out what works for your project. So for Thunder Road, we talked about having a cop car pull up, or a cop escort bringing us into the theater, or figuring out unique things that are unique to your project that can stamp your brand, and get some buzz going at the festival.
Great. Melissa, a couple more audience questions.
Yes. Do you prefer to work with non-union cast and crew? Is it more cost effective to work without unions?
It is definitely more cost effective, for sure. I've worked with both union crews and non-union crews, and have had good and bad experiences with both. And so, yeah, I think it just depends on what the project is, where you're shooting, and what the budget level is. But yeah, I mean, if you're trying to do something micro budget, if you're trying to do it super independent, it is always cheaper to go non-union, because you're not paying all those additional fringes. Some people say that that union members are more experienced, and so you'll get better work, or faster work from those people. I've seen it go both ways. I've had union people that had no idea what they were doing and that I had to fire. I've had non-union people that were incredible, that I will always work with again, that go above and beyond. So it really just depends on the project, and also where you're shooting.
Great. Melissa?
How can filmmakers tastefully raise money and or release a film in the current culture without seeming tacky or money grubby?
Interesting. I actually wouldn't be as concerned about that. I feel like right now people are really hungry for content. People are watching more content now than they have ever before. And so I don't think you should be, worried or ashamed of promoting a project. I think people are eager to watch and support, and also to think about something other than the pandemic. So, and that's just my opinion. Other people might disagree, but yeah, I wouldn't be as worried about that. And the streaming services right now are they need more content than ever before. A lot of streaming services, like their subscribers have doubled over the course of the last few months. And so there is a need for content, and especially because there isn't any new content being created right now, there is this kind of there's this emptiness, there's this like void that has to be filled, because a lot of the distributors who would be buying up stuff right now, that would have bought stuff at South by, that would have been following up on this stuff, and even with postponing or potentially canceling, there's all these places where people were expecting to buy stuff that they can't anymore. And so there is a void to be filled. I know some people that have like started just filming something in their house. They're like, cool, like I have a camera, like let me write something that can all happen in my house, that we can shoot during the pandemic. And so we have something that we can, sell, like either right now or like right, as this is coming out, so that to fill that, like that void. So I think there's actually like opportunities there. But yeah, like I would also say, if you have a short film or like something interesting that like that you made, even if it was, from a few years ago, like I've just been like sharing some like shorts that we made over the past like few years on my Facebook, and people like have at least publicly like responded like really well, being like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. Like, thank you for sharing this, like needed something to like make me smile today or something like that. So I wouldn't be too worried about promoting something during the pandemic. It's really just figuring out how to make something or how to sell it.
Great. Let's do a couple more. We're running out of time here. So, Melissa?
Nicole asks, I know you produced a period piece with Don and Jocelyn on a low budget. What are your tips for anyone trying to produce a period piece indie short?
Yeah, period stuff is tough. Just because, as we all know, like the wardrobe, the production design, like nothing can just be as is, where like you could just, walk out the door and shoot a restaurant and it would be fine. But if it's period, everything has to be changed. So definitely ups the cost of like typically wardrobe and art department are the things that go up the most. Yeah, I would see like, it's always about thinking outside the box. So like, is it possible to, depending on what period it is, of like, is there a costume, history organization that, has some costumes that they might be willing to like let you borrow in exchange for a logo, or how can you find these kind of like vintage art items at like thrift stores instead of renting them from prop houses, which might be more expensive. There are kind of clever ways to do that. One of the things that we found successfully with The Arrival, which is the short that I did with John Jocelyn that was set in the 50s, is finding a location that has a lot of those things already kind of built into the architecture and to the environment. So we actually filmed, there's an area in LA that has a lot of historical mansions, like these like Victorian mansions, and we actually filmed in one of those. And so it's not like an actual residence, and we had to, we weren't allowed to sit on anything because it's all like historical furniture. So we had to bring in the like furniture that we wanted like actors to sit on. But in terms of the backdrop, it looked gorgeous and just immediately established the vibe without a lot of extra art department requirements. And then find a costume designer that like is just really awesome. Lauren Appelt did the costumes for that film and she knocked it out of the park. So, but if you find the right crew members, you can do something really cool.
Great. Let's do one more, Melissa.
Okay, picking one more. Charles said, can you speak to the advantages and disadvantages of directors that come with a team, especially as developing a project? And also, because a lot of those teams started out when no one had much of a career or clout.
Yeah, I would ask like, what do you mean by team? Like in terms of like a directing duo, or or is it like with like a crew? And I guess I'll speak to both since I don't know the answer. But yeah, I mean, I think it's always great to have directors that have a team that they're used to working with, that they have a shorthand with. I think that's great to have. I think it's always interesting to throw out new ideas too of like, okay, great. Like you might have a production designer that, you know, that you love, but maybe you weren't super wild about your DP. So let me like throw out, you know, some ideas. And I think it's always a little bit, you're always weighing whether you want to prioritize experience or whether you want to prioritize someone that's like eager to be there. And in general, what we like to do is we like to prioritize the person that is just really excited and committed to the project, versus the person that's maybe done 10 features, but might be a little bit jaded, because we find that the people that are really excited to be there will tend to go above and beyond. Now that doesn't work for all positions. Like it's really great to have a more experienced AD. It's really good to have a more experienced UPM, but maybe a younger DP that is less experienced but really excited is going to really think outside the box in terms of shots, and maybe that costume designer might go above and beyond and sew a bunch of extra things for you. It just kind of depends, and I think it's always a little bit of a do-si-do of like, you know, I have a whole slew of amazing crew that I love and trust and that have worked on a lot of features that I would highly recommend. And I've gotten burned before sometimes when people like bring in their own people, but they're not as experienced, and I like wish that I had been like, no, but this person, like I can tell you that they're great. I think it's just it just depends on, it's like a case by case kind of thing, but I never turned off by that of like, oh, you have your whole team together. Like that's never a, you know, like a turn off. It's just a conversation to have when crewing up.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this. I know you said a mouthful so far, and we really appreciate your time on this. Is there anything that you would like to let us know that you have coming up? Any projects that are about to be released?
Yeah, well, we have a film called The Werewolf, which will be coming out later this year through MGM's Orion. And then next year, we'll have another movie called Werewolves Within, 2 completely different werewolf movies that are very different with different directors. But that'll be coming out next year. That's based off of a Ubisoft game. Yeah, I would say, you know, feel free to reach out if there are additional questions. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions by email is typically the best way to follow up.
Right, and we'll provide that information to reaching out. Thank you so much for participating with this, and thank you everyone for signing in and listening to us. We're going to be doing this some more, so please let us know if you have suggestions on how we can improve this, different kind of guests that you would love to see in, suggestions on that. And make sure you check out the film grant, which is going to be really important for all you filmmakers that need to get your short films out. I feel like that's been a through line for a lot of these conversations is get out there and just make your own shit. So yeah, be sure and check in on our filmmaker grant, and thank you so much for listening up. All right, bye everybody.